The predator cubs had somehow become investigative units, and they were systematically documenting every protocol violation on the station. Commander Kael'thas stared at the surveillance feed for the third time, hoping the imagery would resolve into something that made sense. It didn't. The cubs, 3 of them, barely half-grown, with mottled silver fur still soft from their recent molting. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Move through the station's main corridor in perfect formation. They carried nothing. They needed to carry nothing. But their eyes tracked every detail with an intensity that predators shouldn't possess. Predators hunted. They didn't investigate. "Run the analysis again," Kael'thas commanded, his secondary arms gripping the edge of the command console with enough force to crack the reinforced polymer. "I want certainty, not conjecture." Vexia's voice crackled through the comm from the research wing, tight with the particular panic that only a chief science officer could manufacture when the universe violated its own rules. "The certainty is the problem, sir. The Cubs have cataloged 47 infrastructure violations in the past 6 hours. 47. They've documented them with photographs, notation, and, I'm not exaggerating, cross-referenced them against station protocol specifications. Impossible. Completely. Their neural architecture doesn't support symbolic reasoning or information retention beyond immediate sensory input. And yet, Vexia's tone suggested the universe had personally offended her. They've created a filing system. Kael'thas's lateral eyes widened, a reflex he couldn't suppress. The filing system on the surveillance feed showed the Cubs had organized their documentation with mathematical precision. Sealed documents lay in neat rows across one of the habitat sector's observation platforms. Some were photographs. Others appeared to be detailed sketches. The implication made his primary brain hurt. "Weaponization?" he asked, though the word tasted poisoned. "External hostile manipulation?" "Negative, sir. We've run every scan. No foreign technology, no consciousness alteration markers, no." The emergency alarm cut through the station. Zelar's panicked roar came through the comm 3 seconds later, raw fury and something worse. Genuine fear. The predator handler never panicked. Zelar had once talked down a fully grown alpha during molt season. He'd negotiated feeding schedules with creatures that saw negotiation as an appetizer. "They found the classified section," Zelar reported, voice shaking. "The Cubs. They've somehow breached the secured storage on level 12. I don't know how. The locks are biometric. They don't have... They shouldn't." "What did they take?" Kael'thas was already moving, his primary arm signaling station-wide alert. "Everything. Surveillance logs from the last rotation, maintenance request records, shift rotation documentation. Sir, they found the incident report from when the water recycling system malfunctioned and nobody reported it for 3 days. The silence that followed was the silence of a commander realizing that predators had just obtained evidence of command negligence. They're bringing it back to the main platform." Zelar continued, his voice carrying the hollow quality of someone witnessing the collapse of professional reality. "They're organizing it by category, by significance, by..." The comm cut to static. In the background of the command center, Emma Johnson continued mopping the floor with meditative focus, completely unaware that the galaxy's foundational assumptions about predator behavior were currently undergoing catastrophic revision. She'd been doing maintenance on C-Shift for 3 years. She'd mopped the command center floors approximately 2,000 times. She knew the layout better than most of the officers who worked there. She also knew that if she looked at what the officers were panicking about, they'd only ask more questions. better to keep mopping. The corner by the environmental controls always needed work. Outside the command center, 3 predator cubs moved through the station's spine corridor in perfect, synchronized formation. One of them wore reflective lenses across its eyes, apparently salvaged from somewhere, catching the station's lights in an almost investigative gleam. They knew where the next protocol violation was. They'd memorized all of them, and they were going to document every single one. Vexia's first theory died within the first hour. "They haven't achieved sentience," she reported from the research wing, her voice carrying the particular tone of someone watching their entire career's foundational assumptions crumble. "The neurological markers are unchanged. Their brain activity is consistent with baseline predator patterns. Elevated, yes, but not transitional toward consciousness." "Then what in the void are they doing?" Kael'thas demanded, watching the surveillance feeds multiply across his command center screens. The Cubs had now expanded their investigation to 3 separate station sectors. 3, in under 90 minutes. "They're being systematic," Vexia said, and the words seemed to cost her something. "Not intelligent, not sentient, just methodical. They observed a pattern, and they're replicating it. We need to identify what pattern they observed, and we need to do it now." Kael'thas didn't hesitate. "Quarantine protocols, full isolation. Seal the Cubs in biocontainment Sector 7. Nothing in, nothing out." It took 16 minutes for the protocols to activate. It took the Cubs 4 minutes to escape. "They didn't break anything," Zilar reported, his voice suggesting he was being personally held accountable for the impossible. "The containment field is intact. The biometric locks never triggered. They just walked through the access tunnel that was designated for maintenance drones. There's no override. They just used the maintenance access like it was always available to them." "Because it was," Emma Johnson said quietly from where she was mopping near the maintenance terminal. "Those tunnels are for authorized personnel. You didn't think to tell anyone they weren't secured against, anything that could climb." Kael'thas's eyes swiveled toward her. "Who is this?" "Maintenance, sir. Shift rotation C." He turned back to his screens. The Cubs were already in Sector 9. Vexia's second theory lasted even shorter. "We'll confuse them. Introduce conflicting data, contradictory environmental stimulus, force their pattern replication to overload. It's a simple disruption protocol." Team 2's report came back 17 minutes later. "They've organized the conflicting data into a separate filing system," the team lead reported, sounding personally wounded by reality. "They've labeled it anomalies requiring further documentation. They're cataloging the contradictions we introduced. We've accidentally expanded their investigation parameters." Vexia went very quiet. Team 3's approach was more direct. Physical isolation. Separate the Cubs. Break the coordinated pattern. Force them back into baseline predator behavior. The Cubs separated, conducted individual investigations for exactly 4 hours, then reconvened at the main platform with their collected documentation and integrated it into a unified filing system that was, objectively, more comprehensive than before. "They're not just observing," Vexia said during the emergency briefing, her secondary arms gripping the conference table hard enough to leave visible claw marks. "They're evaluating us, our competence, our protocols, our failures." "That's impossible," Kael'thas said flatly. "They lack the cognitive architecture for meta-analysis." "And yet," Vexia gestured at the latest surveillance feed, "look at the documentation pattern. Every single report they've compiled identifies systemic failures, not random observations. Failures. They've somehow determined what constitutes acceptable baseline function and what constitutes deviation. They're conducting a comprehensive audit of this station's operational integrity. Zilar's voice crackled through the comm, tight with controlled horror. And they're specifically following someone. Kael'thas's primary eyes snapped to the surveillance feeds. Zilar was right. The Cub's investigation pattern wasn't random. It was following a path. A specific path. The path someone took during regular duty rotations. "Track it," Kael'thas commanded. "Overlay the Cub investigation route against all personnel movement logs." The analysis took 40 seconds. "It's the maintenance staff," the analysis officer reported, confusion evident even in the transmitted data. Specifically, C-shift rotation. Someone from C-shift. The Cubs are literally following the path that C-shift personnel take during their rounds. On the main surveillance feed, Emma Johnson appeared in the corridor, mopping. One of the Cubs approached her, and to Kael'thas's profound shock, it dropped a document at her feet. A perfectly organized record of all the maintenance issues she'd noted in her mopping rounds. The Cub was wearing something reflective across its eyes now. Something that looked almost deliberately like examining lenses, like detective badges. Emma picked up the document, glanced at it, then at the Cub. She nodded once, professionally, and kept mopping. Kael'thas made the decision that would change everything. "Get me sector command. This requires precedent-setting authorization. Tell them the predators on Observation Station Theta 7 have become something we weren't prepared for." "What were they?" Vexia asked quietly. Kael'thas watched Emma continue her work, the Cubs conducting their investigation around her with perfect, impossible synchronization. "I think," he said slowly, "we've accidentally taught them how to be human." Kael'thas brought Emma Johnson to the command center at gunpoint. Technically, it was a security escort, but the 3 armed officers flanking her made the distinction academic. Emma set down her mop with the careful precision of someone who understood that protocol, however nonsensical, still needed to be respected. "So," she said, as Kael'thas gestured her toward the command console. "Bad time to mention I finished mopping the East Corridor?" "The Predator Cubs," Kael'thas said, skipping pleasantries entirely. "You know something. Your investigation pattern." "Wait, they found my sunglasses?" Emma's face lit up with genuine relief. "I've been looking everywhere for those. Where are they? Those were expensive." The command center went very quiet. Vexia's voice crackled through the comm, dangerously controlled. "The sunglasses currently worn by the Predator Cubs are yours?" "Yeah, I lost them about a week ago. Must have been during one of my rounds. Kept meaning to check the storage sectors." Emma squinted at the surveillance feeds. "Are those my sunglasses?" "Those are definitely my sunglasses. The left lens has a scratch. I did that when I dropped them against the maintenance locker." Kael'thas felt his worldview tilt. "You were wearing them," he said slowly, "while conducting your maintenance duties." "Yeah, I mean, the station lighting is weird in some sectors. The polarization helps." "Why are the Cubs—" Emma stopped, watching the surveillance feeds. Watching the Cubs conducting their systematic documentation, watching them move through the station in perfect formation, watching them examine, note, and record every detail, watching them do exactly what she did every shift. "Oh," Emma said quietly. "Oh no." "Explain," Kael'thas commanded. "I wasn't doing anything weird," Emma said, defensiveness creeping into her voice. "I was just working. You see something broken, you note it. You see something inefficient, you document it. You see a protocol violation, you mark it down so you remember to file a work order later. It's not. It's literally just how maintenance staff works. You keep track of what needs fixing. You were wearing specialized visual equipment, Vexia said from the research station, her voice carrying the hollow quality of someone watching their entire career's framework collapse in real time. Optical augmentation designed to enhance pattern recognition in dim lighting conditions, and you were systematically documenting station infrastructure failures. Sunglasses, Emma corrected. They're sunglasses. And yeah, because I work maintenance. You can't just walk around and hope you remember where the broken sensors are. You have to actually pay attention. Zilar's voice came through the comm, raw with something between frustration and broken comprehension. The Cubs replicated your methodology. They observed you conducting informal surveys, and they replicated the exact behavioral pattern. They're following her documented path, the analysis officer said, reviewing footage in real time. Every single location the Cubs have investigated is a location Emma Johnson visited during her last 3 shifts. They're conducting maintenance audits based on observing maintenance audits. They've literally learned systematic problem identification from watching her work. I was just mopping, Emma said. You were wearing detective lenses, Vexia said, and there was something almost accusatory in her tone. You were conducting investigations. Sunglasses. They're literally called sunglasses. Emma gestured at the surveillance feeds showing the Cubs in their perfect formation, wearing the optical equipment. And I wasn't investigating anything. I was doing my job, noticing problems, documenting them, moving on. If you walk the same corridors every day, you start seeing what's wrong. It's not complicated. Kailtas realized, with terrible clarity, that it actually wasn't complicated. That was the entire problem. The Cubs haven't become sentient, Vexia said slowly, as if speaking to herself. They haven't been weaponized. They haven't achieved consciousness. They've simply observed a human conducting routine problem identification, and they've replicated the behavioral pattern with perfect fidelity. Our behavioral lockouts didn't trigger because they're not malfunctioning. Our sentience markers didn't activate because they're not becoming conscious. Our containment protocols failed because they weren't trying to escape. They were working. Zilar appeared on the communication screen, his expression carrying the particular horror of someone who'd spent his entire career studying predator psychology, only to discover he'd missed something fundamental. What she's documented, he said, reviewing the Cubs' files. It's all accurate, every single notation. The water recycling inefficiency in Section 9, the structural stress fractures in the cargo bay, the 17 different protocol violations in the security archives. She found them all because she was just doing her job. And they found them because they were watching her do her job. Kailtas finished, understanding crystallizing into something worse than fear. They observed human problem-solving methodology and replicated it exactly. On the surveillance feeds, the 3 Cubs conducted what could only be described as a shift change. They synchronized their patrol routes, reorganized their documentation, and moved through the station with the kind of methodical efficiency that had somehow broken every single system designed to prevent exactly this. Emma looked at the screens, at the perfectly organized investigation being conducted by predators who'd learned how to think by watching a human mop the floor. So, she said quietly, does this mean I get paid overtime for training them? In the command center, Kailtas, Vexia, and Zilar stared at the surveillance feeds in stunned silence as the predator Cubs Boardcrows, wearing stolen sunglasses like detective badges, continued their systematic investigation of the station with the casual competence of a maintenance worker conducting routine checks. The entire foundation of their understanding of predator behavior had been rebuilt in 1 week by someone who didn't realize she was doing anything remarkable. The emergency council convened in conference room 7 at 300 hours, and Emma Johnson was still holding her mop. "Sit," Kael'thas commanded, gesturing to the chair. "Should I lean it against the wall first?" Emma asked. "The mop can wait." Emma sat. The mop did not. Vexia presented her analysis with the careful precision of someone delivering a eulogy to her own career. The cubs didn't learn predator behavior. They learned human behavior. And they're, objectively, better at it than they are at being predators. They just needed direction, Emma said, stating it like it was the most obvious fact in the known universe. Structure, a task. Cubs have energy, right? You gotta point it somewhere productive. Left alone, they get into trouble. Give them something to do, they do it. It's not complicated. Zilar made a sound that might have been laughter, or might have been the auditory equivalent of a system crash. You've inadvertently created a superior security apparatus through casual observation? I guess. Emma shrugged. I was just trying to remember where the broken sensors were so I could file a work order. The documentation thing is standard. You work maintenance long enough, you develop a system. The cubs just happen to have very good memories. Kael'thas's eyes narrowed. He turned to his command staff. Document everything she does. Everything. It appears to be a training methodology we didn't know existed. That's going to get boring, Emma warned. Mostly I mop, refill supplies, and complain about the break room refrigerator. Vexia pulled up the cubs' complete documentation archive. 743 separate observations. Cross-referenced, categorized, prioritized by operational impact. She stared at it, her professional composure fragmenting. This violates 12 fundamental principles of behavioral programming. Or maybe, Emma said, leaning back in her chair with a kind of casual wisdom that came from 3 years of solving maintenance problems with limited resources. Those principles just don't account for actually having a brain and wanting something to do. Like, predators aren't stupid. They just weren't given anything that required thought. You point them at hunting, they hunt. You point them at observation, they observe. That's not a violation. That's just how it works. Zilar looked at Kael'thas. Kael'thas looked at Vexia. Vexia looked at her analysis of the cubs' work and saw, with increasing clarity, that everything Emma was describing was logically sound. The cubs' documentation is being integrated into official security protocols, Kael'thas announced, effective immediately. Already done, Emma said. They organized it better than the official system. You should just use theirs. The cubs are being officially reassigned, Vexia added, her tone suggesting she was speaking words that violated physics. Investigative Support Unit, Casual Observation Protocol. They maintain the sunglasses. Regulation equipment now. The sunglasses stayed on the cubs' faces in the surveillance feeds, and somehow that made everything worse and better simultaneously. They looked simultaneously ridiculous and absolutely professional, like someone had given predators a job description and they decided to dress for the position. Emma received formal commendation from Sector Command within the hour. Unprecedented advancement in interspecies cooperation. Official recognition. Citation in her personnel file. Promotion recommendation to senior maintenance staff. I literally just lost my sunglasses and cleaned the break room, Emma said to the assembled command staff. Can I get off shift now? I've been on C shift for 6 hours and I really need sleep." Nobody argued. As Emma left the command center, mop in hand, the surveillance feeds showed the three cubs conducting their evening patrol in perfect formation. They moved through the station with systematic grace, wearing their sunglasses like badges of office, documenting protocols, identifying inefficiencies, solving problems. They were doing exactly what they'd observed Emma do, and they were doing it better. Kyle watched them work and made a decision. "Send a message to Sector Command. Tell them we've discovered something in the predator population that changes everything." "What?" Vexia asked. "Potential," Kael'thas said quietly. "They have potential. They just needed someone to show them how." In the corridor, Emma mopped the floor without looking back, completely unaware that she'd just revolutionized xenological understanding across 3 star systems through the simple act of doing her job well. 3 weeks later, Vexia stood before the assembled commanders of Sector 7, holding a presentation that would either revolutionize xenological doctrine or get her permanently reassigned to catalog stellar dust. "The Cubs' patrol data," she began, pulling up the holographic display, "has become the template for all base security protocols. Their observation methodology, their documentation system, their systematic problem identification approach. All of it is now the baseline for optimal operation." The room went very, very quiet. "The human," Kael'thas added from his position in the observation gallery, watching the presentation with the air of someone who'd already accepted that reality had permanently bent around Emma Johnson, "wasn't trying to revolutionize our systems. She was trying to keep track of her own work." A commander from Sector 9 raised a question appendage. "Are we discussing the intentional implementation of human methodologies?" "We're discussing," Vexia said carefully, "the accidental discovery that human problem-solving, when unencumbered by anxiety about solving problems, is demonstrably superior to our systematized approach." Xelar provided the psychological framework. He'd spent the past 3 weeks fundamentally rebuilding his entire career's foundation, and it showed. "We viewed predators as weapons to be controlled. Humans viewed them as colleagues who needed tasks. That one philosophical difference changed everything. The Cubs didn't become revolutionary. They became engaged." The implications spread through the command structure like a virus nobody had inoculation for. Emma Johnson clocked out at the end of her shift exactly on time, as she had for 3 years, completely unaware that her mundane job had become the subject of interdisciplinary study across 3 star systems. The Cubs met her at the maintenance closet in perfect formation, their sunglasses catching the station lights with practiced precision. The lead Cub, the one with the slightly bent left lens, approached her with a document held carefully in its mouth. Emma took it, scanned the contents, and nodded with professional appreciation. It was a perfect replica of her own filing system. The Cub had observed her documentation methodology, internalized it, and created its own version with minor improvements in cross-referencing efficiency. Yeah, good work," Emma said, scratching behind the Cub's ear with casual familiarity that made 3 separate officers in the command center simultaneously question their fundamental understanding of interspecies relations. "See you tomorrow, detectives." She headed to the maintenance closet, mop and bucket in hand, completely and totally unfazed by the fact that she'd just been handed a document that proved predators could now engage in meta-analysis of human organizational systems. In the command center, Kael'thas, Vexia, and Xelar stood in stunned silence, watching the surveillance feeds. "Do you understand what we've witnessed?" Vexia asked, her voice carrying the weight of professional revelation. A human, Kael'thas said slowly, as if speaking would make it more real. Casually created a new civilization within our civilization. And she genuinely doesn't understand why it's remarkable, Zilar finished. Emma made coffee in the break room, humming some ancient human song she barely remembered the lyrics to. Outside the viewport, the three cubs conducted their evening patrol in perfect formation, their sunglasses reflecting the station's lights as they moved through the corridors with systematic grace. She organized a filing system while the coffee brewed. Nothing important, just sorting some maintenance requests by sector and priority. The kind of thing she'd done 1,000 times. The kind of thing that apparently warranted scientific study when observed by predatory species. Vexia's voice carried through the station via official transmission to Sector Command, her tone carrying the particular weight of someone delivering information that would reshape Alliance policy. The data suggests humans don't innovate through conscious effort, she reported. They innovate through casual problem solving. They observe gaps. They fill them. They never question whether the gap filling is revolutionary because, to them, it's simply maintenance. Operational implications? Command asked. Extraordinary risk and extraordinary opportunity, Vexia continued. Every human interaction with our systems poses potential for paradigm disruption. We recommend immediate implementation of observation protocols across all Alliance stations with human personnel. Observation methods? Study humans doing mundane tasks, Vexia said. Do not tell them they're being studied. They'll overthink it and ruin everything. The final image from Observation Station Theta 7 showed Emma drinking coffee in the break room, completely normal. Completely revolutionary. Outside, the three cubs conducted their patrol. The sunglasses caught the light. Documentation protocols continued flawlessly. Nothing remarkable happened. Everything was changed. In a military briefing room 3 sectors away, commanders assembled around surveillance footage that had been classified for strategic analysis. The footage showed a human woman mopping. Just mopping. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. Just a human doing maintenance work with casual competence. And somehow, that footage had made the highest-level strategic review lists across the entire sector. One commander, older than the others, leaned back in his chair and asked the question nobody wanted to ask. If this is what they do casually, what do they do when they actually try? Nervous silence filled the room. Nobody had an answer. Vexia closed her files on the incident, reviewing the complete documentation one final time. The scientific breakthrough, the methodology revelation, the paradigm shift, all of it triggered by one human woman losing her sunglasses. She typed the final notation into the official record. The human universe has changed today. Nobody in it knows yet. In the corridors of Observation Station Theta 7, 3 predator cubs continued their systematic patrol, wearing stolen sunglasses like detective badges. In the break room, Emma Johnson finished her coffee, completely unaware that she'd just become the most studied human in recorded Alliance history. She'd done her job well. That was all she'd ever meant to do. That was all it had taken to change everything. The station hummed with perfectly orchestrated efficiency, its systems running at optimal capacity, its problems identified and documented before they could become critical. All because someone had cared enough to notice what was broken. All because someone had shown a predator cub how to think like a problem solver instead of a weapon. All because Emma Johnson had simply done her shift. And in doing so, had accidentally revolutionized an entire civilization's understanding of what competence could mean.